geeks and geekettes. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, comic book fans the world over, welcome back to that intellectual exercise that we call Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me questions about what I do for a living, and what I do for a living is I write comic books, so let's not waste another second of your precious time. Alex Sheikman. I very much enjoyed your Connor Hawke stories in Green Arrow and the 6-issue miniseries Blood of the Dragon. You related that you were requested to finish your run by setting up for the return of Oliver Queen. But I was wondering what direction would you have taken Connor if the request for Oliver's return never materialized? I did I was asked to write a fill-in issue on Green Arrow initially, and then when I finished it, editor Scott Peterson said, would you consider being the regular writer? And I said, I don't know. I don't know if I'm suited for this book. I don't know where I would take it. I'll write it for 6 months till you find somebody. Well, I ended up writing it for 3 years because I fell in love with the characters, and I quickly realized that this book was a gateway to a lot of crazy adventures, because Connor and Eddie Fires were kind of off in their own corner of the DC universe, so I was free to really play around. With Oliver gone, this was a brand new continuity that I could create from scratch. And of course, the other thing was that I got them to agree to have Rodolfo DiMaggio as the regular penciler. Not that it took much convincing once they saw his artwork. And I told Rodolfo, I said, let's do this for a year. Work with me for a year, because he was looking to move on to film production work, which he did. Very, very, very successful in storyboarding and film production. And some of the biggest movies you've ever seen, some of your favorite movies, have production art by Rodolfo and storyboards by Rodolfo. But then after he left, they kept bringing me great artists, Will Rosado and Doug Braithwaite and guys like that. So I stayed on for another couple of years, and I dug it. I liked the characters, but the workload became too much. I had Nightwing, I had Detective, and they wanted me to do Birds of Prey as a monthly. And I said, and Robin, and I said, this is, the workload's too much. And I said, I went back to my original premise. I'm going to write the book for 6 more months and give you an opportunity to find a new writer. Darren Vincenzo was the editor by this time. And I think it was ordered from on high that they wanted Oliver Queen brought back to life. And so the only things that I were told about this were, we're setting up another writer, set it up so Oliver comes back to life in the next arc following yours. When you leave, the new writer is going to, and of course, the new writer was Kevin Smith. And so I did. I set up a situation where it left open the possibility that Ollie was still alive. But I never had any real plans. I was never going to be the guy to write Oliver coming back. I got to write killing him, but I wasn't going to get to write bringing him back, because my departure they saw as an opportunity to bring in a new writer with a whole brand new storyline, a whole brand new approach to the book, which made perfect business sense. So I really didn't have any plans for Connor beyond that, except I thought, he'd still be out there wandering the world, finding himself, like Kane from Kung Fu. And thus I did the Blood of the Dragon miniseries. I mean, he's a great character. And, I like the fact that he's the perfect figure for, grand adventure, which, is what I featured him in. And he's also a great character for humor. He's not funny, but you can have really funny things happen around him because his reaction is so nonplussed. Charles Santino. This really isn't a question from Charles, more of a contemplation. But I liked it. I thought it was worthwhile. He says, also regarding a writer elevating an artist's game, you talked about the many aspects of the writer to artist dynamic, including whether an artist likes the content of the story, especially the why of what is happening in the story, and the artist's interest in character as well. One important element that you got close to, but I would like a more in-depth examination of, is simply the visual storytelling. Give a great artist a script of 20 pages of talking heads versus 20 pages of visually exciting action that doesn't even need words to get your blood racing, and you are going to elevate the artist's game, no matter how well rendered those talking head stories are. The visually exciting story is going to look better. To use a sports analogy, the pictures are the play-by-play and the captions and dialogue are the color commentary. If the captions and dialogue are as good as the visually dynamic sequential art, then you really have something. But I would rather have a comic with great visual storytelling and so-so story and scripting than good writing on top of boring and or poorly drawn art. But that's just me. Some people love dialogue-driven stories, what a professor of mine used to call, "Look, Mom, I'm writing." Yeah, I agree with everything you say. I can't think of too many examples where like the art wasn't visually stunning, but the story was good, so I'd want to read it. The best example I can think of that kind of story is Harold Gray's Little Orphan Annie. Nobody would ever say that Harold Gray was the most dynamic comic artist ever out there, although he could rise to present high drama, but all within the context of Little Orphan Annie's world. So, yeah, I agree with you. Crappy comic art, which is not only poorly drawn, but the story's poorly told. It doesn't get the story across. It doesn't serve the story, even if the story's good. I've had that happen to me. I've worked with a lot of newbie artists who simply didn't get what I was writing, not because they're stupid or anything else, but because they were newbie comic book artists who had not yet developed the tools for interpreting the script into pictures. I'm not blaming them. Some of these guys went on to be giants in the comic book industry, or at least well regarded. But yeah, I mean, like I said before, asking an artist what he likes to draw is important. And, they all like to draw action. So, to mention Rodolfo DiMaggio again, every artist I work with, I ask them, what do you like to draw? Because I can include that in the stories. And Rodolfo said assault helicopters. So, okay. So it inspired me for the first time in my writing to give Batman a helicopter. And I wrote as many helicopters and helicopter action into the stories as I could because he dug it. And I like assault helicopters too. So, but yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of artists tell me that they enjoyed drawing my stories because there was stuff happening, which you would think an artist would prefer to draw a talking head story because it's a whole lot less work. But as it turns out, it's actually a lot more work. It's much harder to make a talking head story interesting than to make, obviously, a story full of explosions and chases and action and fights interesting, because the interest is there built in. My buddy Graham Nolan, he drew the comic strip Rex Morgan for 10 years, maybe more. And it always looked great. But as he said, at the heart of it, it was people talking. It was a soap opera comic. It was people getting in and out of cars, walking in and out of rooms. And the drama was in the dialogue and the intercharacter relationships. It wasn't really supposed to be in the artwork. But he would do his best. I mean, if you look at his Rex Morgan dailies, it's a master study in how to make the mundane appear interesting. And, that's because Graham is a keen student of classic newspaper comic strips. And he knew how to get the most out of that, those 3-4 panels. But yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of artists say, wow, thanks for including a lot of action. in the story. And for me, it's like, it's not a comic book story without action. It's not a comic story without a lot of action. And you want to avoid those scenes that seem to be in every comic now, where they all go out to dinner and talk. And if you ever watch soap operas, it's a common thing in soap operas because it's cheap to film. They're all in one room. They're all doing something. They're not moving around. They're seated. And while they're sharing an activity, it's eating. It's always eating or drinking. And so those scenes are really easy to write. Now, if I've got a scene where I've got to have an extended exchange between two characters, I try to find anything for them to be doing other than eating. Something where they're walking along, or something's being accomplished, or there's another purpose to the scene beyond simply conveying information to the reader or exploring an interpersonal relationship between two characters. If there's something else going on in the scene, a ticking clock, a bit of humor, some reason for that scene to exist other than just sharing information. Because if you're doing that, if you're just having the characters talk to inform the reader of what's going on, well, readers aren't stupid. You're not stupid. You know that. You know that if you see it in a movie or TV show. Hey, Dr. Explaino is here to tell us what's going on, and the scene's boring. But, skilled writing hides the fact that they're giving you information. The scene is either funny or tense or awkward or whatever, or romantic, but at the same time it's conveying information. But the heart of it, the entertaining part of it, is whatever emotional exchange is going on. So anyway, but that's all to say. I've gotten a little off the subject. Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't an artist want the challenge and the interest of doing a terrific action scene? Jason Shepard. It seems like most Batman writers approach his books as one of two options: superhero forward, garish villains, gadgets, outlandish plots, Gotham is full of giant typewriters, or detective forward, somber villains, psychological plots, Gotham looks like Chicago or Detroit. I feel like this is a natural way to explore all the facets of Batman's character and also to distinguish all the different Batman titles from each other. How does a good Batman writer balance both of these styles? Well, I think that, the world of Batman, the continuity of Batman is so rich that if you're just going one note, like just going superhero stuff, leaning toward like the more fantastic elements of Batman, in some cases like the science fiction elements of Batman with characters like Clayface and Mr. Freeze. If you're just going for that tone, you're cheating. You're cheating the reader. If you go the other way, where it looks like Batman existing in the real world, you're cheating the reader also, because you're ignoring this amazing universe that Batman lives in. I think Gotham should look unlike any other city. I think it should look, wild and crazy. Why not? And if you look at city skylines today with new high rises and things going up, some of our cities are almost unrecognizable and have outlandish structures in them that, don't appear to serve any architectural purpose beyond design. So, I don't see that as a problem. And then somber villains, for me, I don't really want somber villains. I hate that they turn Riddler into a serial killer in the most recent film. It's lazy writing. Batman's villains need to be as colorful as he is. Now, they can be frightening and terrifying and, scary, but they also need to be somewhat outlandish. They need to be somewhat crazy. And, as we've seen, there's so many permutations of Batman. I mean, Batman is such a durable character. He can be taken in any direction. And I think creators should be free to do that. For my part, I wanted to balance all of it. I wanted to visit all of it. So I made references to the 1966 show in my runs. And, I delved into the more detective aspects of it and the high action aspects of it. I don't think I ever had any giant typewriters or anything like that. That seemed like a a bit too much. But I did like the sort of kaleidoscopic, crazy, almost psychedelic feel of a really good Batman story, where it's kind of like our world, but it's kind of not. And so I tried to incorporate everything from, Batman's original incarnation to the 66 show to the work of people like Denny O'Neil and Archie Goodwin and others, and sort of, explore that world to give you a different story, a different kind of story every month. I mean, I dealt with time travel, so I guess I did a little bit of the 50s sci-fi thing as well. So I just wanted to. There was no reason to tell the same kind of story over and over and over again. One story I might do might be more superheroic. Another one might be more film noir. And I just wanted to be all over the place. But make it consistent. Keep the characters consistent and their motivations consistent. Obviously, I mean, everybody has their own version of Batman in their head, and my job was to present that in a way that felt the same every month. So it was a familiar place for readers to go, but not necessarily get what they expected. And largely, especially when Denny O'Neil was group editor, my job was to sort of tamp down superhero stuff a little bit, because Denny didn't like Batman mixing it up with the superheroes all that much. And I agreed with him from that aspect. But yeah, I just wanted to do it all. And you have to strike a balance in your mind. Am I getting too crazy here? I mean, Doug Mensch, along with Kelly Jones, sort of leaned into the sort of classical horror look when they did their title. And why wouldn't you? You've got Kelly Jones and Doug Mensch. I mean, that was their instincts. That's the way they went, and it worked. And moreover, it was consistent with what Alan Grant and I were doing at the same time. It was consistent. It was different, but it was consistent. They weren't changing the characterizations of the characters. The only major characterization change I made was suggesting that the Penguin be sort of rebooted, a soft reboot on the Penguin to make him more of a fixer, more of a background character. Not out committing crimes himself, but getting others to commit crimes, and to make him more of a Sidney Greenstreet manipulative character. And Graham and I came up with the Iceberg Lounge, and a place for him to be, and it actually made Penguin more a part of the continuity than an occasional appearance. He appeared a lot more in this new persona, this new version, which didn't change the character at all. He was still a womanizing braggart and a creep and sly and all that stuff. But I just thought it made him fit better. I thought the original Penguin was a little too fantastical, actually a little too ridiculous a character to fit in with the way Batman was being portrayed in the 90s and up until today. So I hope that answered your question. I just sort of wandered around there, thinking out loud, which is what I do. This show's not scripted. I bet you're surprised. Joshua Ignatowski, what, in your opinion, is the difference in writing between a genre and a formula? And at what point does genre degenerate into a formula, or a formula evolve beyond blind adherence to limiting checkboxes and ascend to being a genre? Formula kind of exists inside genre. They're not two separate things. For example, the private eye story. The common formula for a private eye story is, we introduce the private eye, and he's a tough guy, and he's opinionated, and whatever, and independent, and he meets a man or woman, usually a woman, and she, has a problem that she needs solved. And we find out over the course of the story that she's been lying from the beginning. So she's never told the private eye the truth, and so he gets involved. He goes, blundering in deeper and deeper into, a conspiracy much larger than the one of, checking up on her husband or looking for a lost dog, or whatever the MacGuffin is supposed to be. It turns out to be, something far more dangerous. Now, you can take that formula, you can stand it on its head. The movie Chinatown stood it on its head. The novel by Mark Bem, Eye of the Beholder, stands it on its head, puts it in a barrel, nails the barrel shut, and shoves the barrel off a cliff. I mean, Eye of the Beholder is like the last word in a private eye novel. It completely starts out with the same formula, goes in a way that, it goes in a direction no one else has ever gone with a private eye novel. And so you can be in genre and use formula, but break the formula as well, but still be in the genre. Eye of the Beholder is very much a private eye story, but not like any other one you've ever read. And then you can go crazy. You can have, Jim Browdigan. He's kind of an absurdist writer from the 70s. He wrote, Dreaming of Babylon, which begins as a private eye novel and then just sort of turns into a psychedelic, crazy head trip, like every Richard Browdigan novel. And just like he's determined to not only break formula, but to set fire to it and burn it down and make it completely unrecognizable. He challenges you, to finish the novel. So, there's all different kinds of ways of doing that stuff. But it's, so formula and genre, now, they're just two separate things. And whatever genre you're working in, you should strive to break formula, not do what was done before. And, I mean, the private eye formula, which is pretty much set in stone by Dashiell Hammett. I'm using private eye because we're all familiar with it. Dashiell Hammett sort of sets it in stone with the Maltese Falcon, and everybody after that are imitating him. I like to say that every single episode of Magnum PI was a different version of Maltese Falcon. And that's true of almost every private eye story you'll ever see, from radio shows like Richard Diamond to, TV shows like Monk or Psych. They start out with a premise where the protagonist thinks he knows what's going on and finds out he doesn't. The clues mount up. He's either realized I was wrong all the time or whatever. And now an example of flipping that formula on its head was Columbo. And the two guys, Levinson and Link, that created Columbo, they were determined to flip the whodunit on its head. And they did it by starting with the murder. So it's not a whodunit. It's a will they be caught. So we see the murderer, we see the murderer. The mystery, for all intents and purposes, is solved for us. Now it's up to the protagonist of the story. And they wrote a number of these kind of stories. Many of them appeared on Alfred Hitchcock Presents, where you would see the murder, and then will the murderer be caught? And probably the most famous of these is what was not written by them. It was Roald Dahl wrote A Leg of Lamb. If you ever get to see an episode of Alfred Hitchcock, look for A Leg of Lamb. It's just a terrific story where we see the murder, will the murderer be caught? And finally, Levinson and Link wrote a stage play using this formula called Prescription Murder, featuring a Lieutenant Columbo, and the rest is history. So you see, you can take it, you can screw that formula around, you can run it backwards and forwards, you can, mash it, fry it, serve it in a stew, and as long as those components are still there, even if they're not in the right order, it's still in the genre, even though you've violated the formula. And the thing is that, you want to avoid formula at all costs. It goes along with what I say about, is there a better way to say this? I mean, I'm writing something right now, and your instincts as a writer are to go formula, stay with the formula. I mean, that's your first instinct. That's your Jeopardy answer. Your first answer is to go with formula. And you have to say, no, no, no. Okay, yeah, that would be a simple way of doing this. But I don't want to do it that way because the reason I thought of that first is because I've seen it a million times. And this is just going to be my version of it. I'm writing something right now where I came up, I need something to happen. I need a character to do something with another character for a desired result. And the first scene I thought, not only have I seen this before, I think I've written this scene before. So I don't want to do that. So, this was like 2 days ago. And I thought, well, let me just leave it alone. Let me just sort of let it simmer. And then today I realized, oh, whoa. Here's an aspect I didn't think about that makes that scene work, gives that scene a reason to work that it didn't have in the other versions I've seen and the other versions I might have written. It's got a whole different driving force in that scene, and I'm going to sort of change the setting around and, pop in a few surprises that I've never seen before. And, I'd like to be more specific, but, I'd be telling you something that is not in production yet. So I'd be spoiling it for you. So anyway, so your first instinct is to go with formula, and you have to resist that urge. Like, is there a better way to say this? Is there another way to go with this? Yeah, it's a wrestling picture, but I'm gonna throw a spanner in here. I'm gonna throw something different. Think about the movie Rocky. Rocky, for all intents and purposes, was a typical boxing movie. Hollywood made boxing movies from the silent era on up. But what Sly did was he gave us everything he wanted, but not in everything we wanted, but not in a way we wanted it. And he did it more as like a portrait film, even though there's all the boxing action. And the movie doesn't end the way you thought it was going to end. It's inspiring. And the thing is, it does end in the way you expected it, but then again, it doesn't end in the way you expected it. He gave you everything you needed in a boxing movie, but not in the way you expected it. I mean, he broke formula, but stayed within the genre. Now, you said, can you bend formula and create a new genre? Usually new genres are either a mashup of two former genres, or the addition of something, to an existing genre. I mean, Blade Runner is a private eye story, but it's set in the future, and it has more going for it. So it's a mashup. It's its own genre kind of thing of standard private eye story. I mean, think about it. It's got the woman who has the answers and won't give them to him. He's sort of feeling around in the dark, but it breaks formula in that he finds out things about himself that he didn't know. So, anyway, I think you get what I'm saying here. But great question. Great question. Again, thinking out loud here. Twin spin. Sorry, it's not for you, Joshua. It's for Jason Shepard. Jason says every movie buff has at least one movie that they know is absolute garbage, yet they love it wholeheartedly. For me, it's 1968's The Green Slime, co-written by Batman creator Bill Finger. The writing is ridiculous. The acting is hammy. The monster suits are laugh-inducing. And yet I adore this movie and rewatch it regularly. What's your favorite bad movie that you love? Green Slime is like epically bad. It's just epically cheesy, but in such a way that you gotta love it. Now I watch it for fun. It's just like, oh man, you're right. This movie is goofy as hell, but I will watch it. But when I watched it with my kids, they were like 10 and 12. They loved it. They loved it for what it was. They didn't think the monsters were laughable at all. They were into it. And, it's a crazy movie, and it's so well paced. Usually really bad movies are leadenly paced and they're boring. Green Slime isn't boring. There is something to engage the eye constantly. And it's just, I don't know, it's delight. It's like a parody of itself while you're watching it. I think it should be remade by somebody really skilled. Wes Anderson should remake Green Slime. I just thought of that. Can you see that? With obvious miniatures, and that'd be pretty cool. Okay, what are the movies that I apologize for? And I don't apologize. I do not believe in guilty pleasures. If you want to spend the afternoon watching F Troop reruns, God bless you. If that's what you like, that's what you like. Don't be ashamed of it. If that's something that, you see value in and everything else, whatever it is you watch. Like I mentioned soap operas earlier. You watch soap opera? I'm not going to judge you. You like soap operas. I like a lot of weird stuff. I like a lot of oddball movies nobody else would like. Okay, one that was kind of, my message board was infamous. My old message board was infamous for defending the movie Congo. And I do like Congo. I just bought the 4K version and watched it, and I loved it all over again. Yeah, it's not a good movie. It's a huge mess. It's like one of those messy Hollywood productions. They probably did 1,000 reshoots, 1 million rewrites, and everything else. And it's hardly anything at all like the Michael Crichton novel, which was, one of his best novels. Really frightening novel that he wrote, Congo. And this one kind of tells the same story, but in a goofy way. And some of the effects are awful. But the cast is so much fun. The guy playing I can't remember that actor's name. The guy playing the guy who squires the talking ape around, he's not so good. He's one of those annoying know-it-all beta male science characters that seems to be in every Spielberg production, and this was done through Spielberg's company. But you got Ernie Hudson playing the Great White Hunter, and he's obviously digging every minute of it. He puts on like this Ronald Coleman type accent. He's terrific. Joe Pantoliano is in it in a short sequence, and he's always effective. Tim Curry is just eating the scenery in every scene he's in as this ridiculous Hungarian or Croatian con man looking for the lost city of gold. And Laura Linney, fine dramatic actress, and probably considers this the worst thing she's ever been in, brings it. I mean, she knows she's got to work hard to make this material go, and she does. And Bruce Campbell is in at the beginning and does one of his best on-scene screams ever. So there's a lot to like. And like Green Slime, it keeps moving. This movie just gets, out of the blocks and just keeps going. And even it gets outrageous and sometimes cringy and sometimes, embarrassingly cheesy. I still dig it. I'll rewatch it because it's fun. It's fun. It's a fun movie. I wish someday they would do a straight up version of Crichton's novel. I think that would be a blockbuster hit. Now another one, if I had a guilty pleasure, this would be it. Lucy, Luc Besson film starring Scarlett Johansson, is the stupidest movie I love. This movie is stupid, which is ironic because it deals with the power of the mind, the power of the brain. It takes the long disproven theory that we only use 10% of our brain, and it uses that as the hook for a movie in which Scarlett Johansson is accidentally overdosed with a drug that increases brain activity. And she gets what should have been a lethal dose of anything. If you had this much salt get absorbed in your body, you'd be dead in 5 minutes. But she gets this enormous amount of this drug leaked into her system. And she basically becomes a superhero. I mean, it's completely ridiculous. But I love it. And I'll watch it over and over again. Even though I'm like, God, this is so dumb. It's grandly dumb. It embraces stupidity with a fervor I rarely see in films. But it's a Luc Besson film. So like the other bad movies I mentioned, moves like a bullet. I mean, you can't take your eyes off it. And you got ScarJo, and she's totally committed to the role. She does a great job. And you got Morgan Freeman being Morgan Freeman. And yeah, but it's the dumbest movie I love. But I won't apologize for it because I enjoy it. Why not? Why not? It's like if you're a hockey fan, do you have to apologize for that? No, you shouldn't have to apologize for that. Okay. I mean, what are the tennis fans going to look down their nose at you? It's the same damn game, basically. It's just more fighting in one of them. Anyway, I'm wandering now. Okay, next question. Dan Perrin, which of the Fantagraphics EC library editions would you recommend highest for someone who wants to get into the era and publications? He mentioned that the Dark Horse versions, some of the coloring isn't true and everything else. I have the Dark Horse versions, and they're okay because I wanted to see the stories in color, but I also have the complete Russ Cochran library that was done through the 80s. It's these big oversized hardcovers and slipcases, and they're all shot from the original artwork. So I have them, and generally that's what I will go back to and look at. And they're in black and white, but they did Mad in color, and the coloring is very, very well recolored by Maurice Everett. So the original colorist, so you can't go wrong there. But anyway, I agree with you. I'd rather see the Fantagraphics editions, and I do own a couple of them. These are the ones I would recommend. First thing I think of, everybody thinks of horror when they think of EC. They think of Tales of the Crypt, Vault of Horror. I don't. I think of the science fiction books they did. Weird science, weird fantasy. And of course, the first thing I think of is Wally Wood. This collection is a must. The Spawn of Venus, it's all the Wally Wood science fiction stories in one. And Wally Wood here was breaking new ground when it came to visuals. Every science fiction anything after Wally Wood's run at EC owes something to Wally Wood, because he was doing this, he was just reimagining what aliens looked like, spaceships, the gadgetry, the level of detail, costuming, everything is, he creates his whole, in each of these 8-page stories, creates this whole sci-fi universe unique to that story. And it's just brilliant stuff. And I know a lot of people are fans of like Al Williamson's sci-fi work. I'm not particularly, because I don't think Al Williamson was that good a storyteller. Wood was far more in your face. Although Williamson contributed a lot to sci-fi imagery with his sort of lived-in look of his ships and the way Han Solo is an Al Williamson character. He wouldn't have looked that way without Al Williamson. So, but this is one. I'm gonna geek out here on EC, so just buckle up. Another one, Wally Wood's War Stories from Two-Fisted Tales and Frontline Combat. For my money, the EC's greatest achievement were the war titles, edited and created by Harvey Kurtzman and written largely by Harvey Kurtzman, and the artist would work from Harvey's layouts. And these war stories are unlike any war comics up to that period, because they tried to show all sides of combat. This wasn't, heroic, muscle bound, rah-rah heroes, killing the enemy by the bushel load. Kurtzman was doing everything he could here to present war as ugly as he could make it, but without being, like unpatriotic or anything like that. But these are very much like anti-war stories, because who's pro-war? And you have to be sick. But these are Wood's, greatest war stories done for Two-Fisted Tales and Frontline Combat, all in one volume from Fantagraphics. Really nice hardcovers. Kurtzman, again, these are the stories that were written, penciled, and inked by Kurtzman. Extremely impactful stuff. Almost all of these stories are set during the Korean War, which was happening as these comics are being published. The Korean War was in the headlines, and Harvey was writing the stories about them. And I got to say also that Harvey was a bug for research. Everything everything had to look as close to historically accurate as they could make it back then. And this one has some terrific stuff. A story called If, which is one of the most amazing comic stories ever done. And it's kind of neat because EC had this, like, they didn't have a house style. I mean, you go from Harvey Kurtzman's loosey-goosey, cartoony style to Wally Wood with this almost, photorealistic kind of artwork. And, this is another example. This is Jack Davis. It's a book called Death Stand. It's a collection. It's all of Jack Davis's war stories from Frontline Combat to Twisted Tales. You get a lot of Civil War stories, but mostly you get his Korean War stories. And the Jack Davis-Kurtzman collaborations on the Korean War stories are some of my favorite war comics ever. Even more so than Wally Wood. Davis really put across, he was so good at drawing mud. I mean, his characters are sort of tired and rumpled and stained, and, they all needed a shave and a bath, and it just brilliant stuff. Davis does some absolutely brilliant stuff in these stories. And there's one story, it's called Belly Robber, and it's the only comic book story that ever made me cry. Tears welling up in my big gorilla eyes over a story called Belly Robber. So that's another one you need to check out. I'm spending a lot of money for you here today. I think we're up to like $150 in comic collections. Okay, Deadly Beloved, which for some reason Max Allan Collins gets a cover credit for. These are Johnny Craig's horror stories. There's also a collection of Johnny Craig's crime stories, which is also good. Johnny Craig is one of the EC artists that I don't think gets as much attention as he should. He has this real graphic, really fresh, contemporary style that I really like. It's kind of like, you can see where it had like a Milton Caniff influence, but then Johnny adds like a magazine illustrator kind of look to the stuff. And boy, it's just terrific. It's absolutely terrific. He drew somewhat like Lee Elias. Lee Elias is another, who unfortunately never worked for EC. Lee Elias is another guy. Has kind of he started off with Milton Caniff because so many of them did, because they were young men or kids looking at Milton Caniff going, "Ooh, I want to draw like that," and then sort of making it their own, sort of taking that chiaroscuro style and making it their own. But Craig, awesome storyteller, and if I'm not mistaken, he wrote a few of his own stories, particularly the crime stories. Rather than Feldstein and Gaines writing them. Largely Feldstein. And this last one, Bomb Run, which it collects all of the war stories by John Severin, most of them inked by Will Elder. And these, again, are a lot of World War II stories, Civil War stories, but largely, World War II and Korea. And awesome. And John Severin was as big a stickler for authenticity as Kurtzman was. So, which is weird because Severin was probably Kurtzman's least favorite artist of all of the artists who worked on Mad and who worked on the war titles. He didn't like Severin's work. And he hated Severin's inking, which is why he put Will Elder over him. But those two guys were the most simpatico when it came to getting this stuff right. I'm sure Wally Wood was just as interested. I think, Jack Davis was, a dedicated professional, but I don't know how much he cared about getting it accurate. But Severin was a stickler for accuracy, and I know this from my own personal experience with Big John Severin. So let's see. Well, I think we got another question here. David Wolf. DC calls you up and asks if you'll write an original graphic novel set in World War II. The only criteria is the story is some vital mission requiring a team-up of most of DC's World War II stable of characters. The Unknown Soldier, Gravedigger, The Losers, Hunter's Hellcats, Sergeant Rock and Easy Company, the Blackhawks, Number one, do you accept the assignment? Number two, would you prefer to write just the graphic novel? Or would you also like to do individual stories for each of the characters preceding the graphic novel? Imagine how awesome an omnibus would be for this. And three, why has this not already happened? If not you, then another writer. Well, I think, largely it didn't happen before because the war titles were taken over by an editor who didn't like me and told me to my face that I would never be allowed to write a war story at DC because he was going to give all of them to Garth Ennis. And I'm not blaming Garth Ennis. I don't think Garth Ennis even approved of that policy. I think Garth Ennis thought, hey, the more war comics, the better. Let Chuck write. But would I take the assignment if they could afford me? And with every passing day, it looks like less and less likely they could afford to pay me what I would want to do this. And I'm kind of past, as much as I would love to write this, I'm kind of past writing just for the fun of it, just for the enthusiasm of it, although I would be hugely enthusiastic and it would be a lot of fun. And of course, it would have Rock. It would have all of Easy. I'd probably pick like an Alistair McLean type Guns of Navarone, Where Eagles Dare, some kind of big adventure. Some kind of adventure that would either shorten the war or prevent the Nazis from escaping with some vital new technological achievement. Something big that would bring all these characters together. Of course, I want Rock. Of course, I would want the Haunted Tank. Love those dudes. And Unknown Soldier. To me, the story would begin with Unknown Soldier. Unknown Soldier gets assigned this crazy assignment, wherever, in Lapland, and he uncovers this nefarious Nazi plot that will, destroy the world or whatever. We're in James Bond land now, and so some crazy scenario. So we begin with Unknown Soldier, and then a team must be assembled. Either that, or like you said, do a Magnificent Seven kind of thing, where I do individual stories of each character leading to this bigger story. That would be cool. I would like to see an omnibus like that, even if it wasn't written by me, although written by somebody, like Garth, or somebody who gives a crap about this material. The Losers, yeah, gotta have all of them in it. Johnny Cloud, Gunner and Sarge, Captain Storm, Mademoiselle Marie, why not? Throw her into the mix. And Gravedigger, yeah, Gravedigger, I like Gravedigger, he's a cool character. I even know how I would characterize him. I used to work for a guy who was part of the Red Ball Express, which was largely black soldiers who would drive trucks to the front in Europe. And he told me some crazy stories. And I based Gravedigger on him because he's a real cool guy. And Black Hawk, yeah, why not? Why not throw Black Hawk in there into the mix? And while we got Black Hawk, the Boy Commandos. Let's go nuts. All the DC war characters. Let's go all the way back to the Golden Age and bring the Boy Commandos into it. I can see that happening. I'm kind of curious. I don't think the Boy Commandos ever appeared in a regular DC war title. I don't think Rock or any of those guys ever ran across these kids. It might have been fun. But Rock had his own, what was it, the Unit 14 or whatever. They were all these children who were part of the French Resistance. That's no more ludicrous than the Boy Commandos. Although, yeah, maybe it is, because the Boy Commandos actually had an official status within the armed forces. Anyway, yeah, I would do it if the money was right, or if they're real persuasive, or if there was a chance in hell that it would actually get done right. And I'll tell you what, if I was going to do it, since we're playing Fantasy World, if I was to do something like this, I would want, for artists, I would want Will Conrad. I worked with him on Great War of Separation for Rippaverse, and he likes drawing the military stuff, and he draws great war scenes. And I can imagine with the amount of effort he put into drawing, choppers and tanks and armored vehicles and things like that, I can imagine he would get into a World War II thing. I don't know. Never talked to him about it. Maybe we'll do one on our own. Maybe Rippaverse needs a war book. What do you think? Let me know. BrunoBookstore@gmail.com. BrunoBookstore@gmail.com. If you've got questions, suggestions, whatever. Awesome questions this week. I know I rambled on a few. Because like I said, I see the questions, obviously, before I put them up here. But I don't spend a lot of time like, what am I going to say? Coming up with some sort of, pretentious, prepared remarks. I think you prefer it if it's just off the top of my head, off the cuff, as it were. So, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching and liking and subscribing and spreading the word. And I will see all of you, hopefully, down the road.